and foremost, I am just going to say to everyone watching or listening around the world, a big thank you for tuning in with this latest episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Today is episode 538, believe it or not. It's quite surreal to say that, but it is true. Thank you to all of you who have stuck with me for this length of time, and to anyone tuning in for the first time. I am truly honored and blessed and just very, very grateful to welcome to the show today the esteemed spiritual author Stephen Knapp, who is also known as Sri Nan Dananda Dasa. Now, I've probably murdered that name, but I had to try. I spend more time practicing names, Stephen, than I do practicing or preparing questions, but that's another story. And this gentleman today does incredible work within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He is head of a temple within that movement in Detroit, the author of multiple books, including The Secret Teachings of the Vedas, Proof of Vedic Culture's Global Existence and the Heart of Hinduism, as well as others. And really, Stephen will have his own definitions for the work that he does and why that he does it. All I can say from my side is that this is a man who makes a profound positive difference in the lives of so many people all around the world. And today we will find out more about his spiritual journey, why he does what he does, but also spiritual lessons for all of you, the listeners. If you are seeking your path, or if you are on your path, but maybe you're a little bit confused about where to go next, any level, I say level very loosely, any stage that you're at on the spiritual path, hopefully there will be a little bit of wisdom or inspiration, relatability, accessibility in this talk today. So that is our intention. And Stephen, the last thing for me to do is to say a big thank you to you, as I said I would before we began. Hare Krishna, and thank you so, so much for joining us this morning. Thank you.
And Hare Krishna to you too, and all the listeners out there. Thank you for tuning in.
Absolutely. Well, it is great to be here. It is wonderful to be here. And hopefully, I've done that justice because you do a lot of amazing, incredible work. As I mentioned, I mean that sincerely. The impact that you have on a lot of people's lives is just absolutely incredible. And I forgot to mention, by the way, I apologize, that this year you were also awarded the Padma Shri. Now, I'm probably murdering that name as well, but the fourth
Oh,
highest.
that's close. That's close.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, you'll have to help me with the pronunciations. But in other words, a very high civilian honor in India for your contributions to literature and education. And just to get things warmed up, Stephen, as soon as that has just happened, how does it feel to be given such a prestigious award and to be recognized in that way? We'll just start with this one as something easy to get things going, please, if that's okay.
Oh, it was quite an honor. I mean, I was not expecting it at all. But I knew about the Padma Shri Award because the Padma Shri Award is the fourth highest civilian award given by the government of India. The third highest is Padma Bhushan. Second highest is Padma Shri Bhushan. And the highest is Bharat Ratna, which is the jewel of Bharat or India. And so I had a few friends. A friend of mine was David Frawley, who's had the Padma Vibhushan or Padma Bhushan Award, third highest. And I had another friend, Subhash Kak, Professor Subhash Kak, who had won the also the Padma Shri Award. So I knew about these awards, but then, I wasn't thinking that I would get such an award like that. So, I mean, it was on January 24th, actually, of this year, when I was already asleep, but in the middle of the night, I got a call from the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C. And I guess they were working on Indian time or something, but they called me up at about 11:30 at night, and it woke me up, and I was actually thinking, do I even want to get this call? Who's calling me at this time of night? But I thought, well, maybe it's important. Maybe I better go check out and see who it is. And then I looked on the ID panel where it said Indian Embassy. I'm going like, Indian Embassy? What are they calling me for? I thought, how the mind works. It always thinks of the worst scenario that could happen. So immediately my mind is thinking, I'm in big trouble now. I did something. I wrote some article that they didn't like, and they're going to tell me about it. But then so I thought, well, let me take a chance. So I answered the call, and the person on there said, hello, is this Stephen Knapp? I says, yes, it is. Oh, is this a good time to talk? And I said, well, now that I'm up, I guess so. So he said, oh, very sorry, sorry, sorry. And then he said, but my colleague wanted to make sure you were available. She's going to call you next. And I said, well, what's this about? Well, she'll tell you about it. Then I'm going like, oh man, this is worse than I thought it was, and but then his colleague called and she told me that, well, we just want to let you know that you've won the Padma Shri Award. And I was like, what? And she said, well, are you happy? I was like shocked. So I said, then I thought, man, I better say something. I better get out of you know, this space where I can't think of what to say. So I said, yeah, I'm shocked. I'm surprised. I'm happy. It's like a lifetime of service finally being recognized by Mother India. And she said, that's right. And she said, but the one thing is we're coming out with the official announcement tomorrow, which was the 25th, which is they do that every year. And so don't say anything to anybody about it until then. So then I was starting to wonder, is this for real? I mean, what if I'm not on the list? What happens then? But then the next morning, about 11 o'clock, I went on the Indian government website where it had all of the Padma awardees listed. And I'm going down the list and I don't see my name. I don't see my name. And then down finally at 100, number 123, the Sri Stephen Knapp for Literature and Education, USA. I said, there it is. It's for real. So I was really shocked about that. But then what happened was I got the media in America, the Indian media, especially in America, started picking up on the fact that I was the only Westerner in America at that time, the only Western American that got that award this year. And so they were starting to carry it. Local Indian media was carrying it and making articles about it. And so, the word got out. And then it was like 2 months later when the Indian government finally contacted me to let me know when the award ceremony was going to be. So then they were going to pay my way and everything to go. And I also had an assistant come with me because I'm getting a little older. I can use some help. So they paid both of our ways to go. And it was April 28th, a good couple months later, then they finally had the ceremony in the big opulent Rashtrapati Bhavan in Delhi. And so that was the whole experience, staying at the Ashok Hotel, going to the ceremony, meeting the President of India, meeting the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Um, it was quite a highlight of my life. There's no doubt about it. And then, so then you go to the award ceremony, and the president pins a medal on you. You get your medal on your shirt. Then she gives you a golden tube with the certificate. And I thought the certificate would be, like 8 by 11 or something like that. But it was like 20 by 40 inches, a big poster. Puts it, you got to get a nice frame for it and everything. And it announces that, due to your high qualities, the President of India, am awarding you the title of Padma Shri. And so that was a very unique experience because the thing of it was, at the time, I was starting to think that, I'm getting a little older. I don't have the same amount of energy. I can't get around as well. I can't do as much as I used to do. I used to go on these intense lecture tours, doing like 2 to 3 lectures a day for a month at a time. And, I've reached a point where I just can't do that anymore. And I was starting to think that, I might as well be one of those old cows that you just put out to pasture and let them graze their days away, And I was thinking, my usefulness is going down. I'm not reaching as many people. And then all of a sudden, about a year ago, I got an award for my work in managing temples from the Hindu Mandir Empowerment Council. And then a week after that, I got an award for a lifetime of contributions to the Indian diaspora and the global Hindu community from the Vishva Hindu Parishad of America. And then it was about 4 months later that they called me to let me know I was winning the Padma Shri Award. So all of a sudden, everything's up on a whole nother level again, you know? So it's like one of those things where sometimes when you think you're just working, you're just doing your job and, trying to let other people know about the Vedic culture, which is what I've always tried to do, all of a sudden your work has reached a whole nother level because of an opportunity that you didn't even know existed. And that's how I feel about it. Even though I've always tried in a humble way to let more, especially Westerners, know about the meaning, the purpose, and the functionality of the Vedic tradition, the spiritual path especially. Sometimes you're not aware of opportunities that open up for you that you didn't even know were there. And I tell people that sometimes you just need to keep doing what you're doing because you don't know the ramifications, you don't know the effect of it. And gradually, opportunities will open that you weren't even prepared for. Which was one thing that happened when I was in Delhi, is that I was able to do interviews for, I think, the Times of India, Doordarshan TV, the ANI television network. Uh, these were short, like 2-minute interviews, but explaining my respect for the Vedic tradition and what it's done for me. And of course, how I was also inspired by my own spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, to share this knowledge with others. And so that was something that was also a unique opportunity to be able to explain because that reaches thousands. Just those networks alone reach thousands and thousands of people. And hopefully, it gives the Indian audience a further reason to take interest in their own culture by seeing a Westerner not only so dedicated to it, so interested in it, a practitioner of it, but also someone who's been recognized with the Padma Shri Award, which, um, according to one letter I got from Amit Shah, who's the Homeland Minister, the Home Minister, he was explaining to me this is like a People's Choice Award where you're nominated by enough people that the panel who goes over the nominations, they pick out who's going to win these awards for this particular year. But they don't just, take for consideration your popularity or anything like that, but they take into consideration how your work affects other people, how your work affects society, and that you don't have any skeletons in the closet, so to speak. And so once it passes this panel, then it also has to be approved of by the President of India and the Prime Minister of India. Once they give the approval, and they obviously have to know what you've been doing and all that, once they give the approval, then you're up for getting the Padma Award, Padma Shri Award. So it's a process. And like I said, it was something I was never expecting, but quite humbled by it, but quite honored by it at the same time that at this point in my life, I was still, alive to receive it because some people get it posthumously. They've already left this world and they're just now getting the award. Someone else picks it up for them. But I was thinking, well, at least I'm still alive to get it, So um, it was very, a great highlight of my life. That's all I can say for that. So, and I'm very proud to have gotten it.
Absolutely. So you should be, Stephen. I mean, it's a remarkable achievement, and that's why I've just started things off with that because the recognition, as you said there, of a lifetime of service. It's quite a funny story about the phone call and everything, the middle of the night. I think from the outside looking in, we always assume that these things are sort of more glamorous or more organized, but actually when I speak to people like this, things like this often happen in a funny way like that. But it's a beautiful recognition and it's very, very, very well deserved. And the I also, by the way, I have to say, it's a very valuable lesson what you shared there as well about, basically you were thinking, that's it, I'm finished, I'm on the pastures, I'm resting, and then this has come and all happened. So with all of that being said, I have to bring this topic up as well, which is having lived a lifetime of service so far, dedicated service, I mean, many, many years, dedicating your whole life to this selfless service of helping other people. How do you measure the impact of that? Because obviously, with winning this award, I can imagine it, it's got you thinking of that. Maybe you were thinking of it before. And I'm curious to sort of put myself in your shoes just for a moment, if that's possible, of if I was putting books out there and lecturing, like you said there, 2 or 3 times a day, and broadcasting and teaching and running the temple. And I mean, there's so many things. It sounds like a whirlwind from this side. But how you actually measure in those sort of intangible moments where people come to you and just say to you, well, my life wouldn't be like this if it wasn't for the wisdom that you shared. And obviously, that's a continuation of ancient traditions. It's a continuation from your own teacher, as you mentioned there. So I'm hopefully putting that in a balanced perspective that this is moving sort of through you in many ways from the generations on to the generations. But even if you look at it like things that there's a lot of things that you've shared that have had an impact on my own life. There's people all around the world. Some of them you meet them, some of them you might never meet them, but they read your books and they've had a positive impact from it. And I'm wondering from your side how that is something that you sort of quantify or break down if you're even able to. Basically, that's the question in a nutshell, really, Stephen.
Well, sometimes I'm not even aware of my influence or what the influence of my work has been until, like, maybe I go to a conference and people, congratulate me on the work I've done, or, this Padma Shri Award. Because sometimes writing is a lonely business, It's like if I'm hanging out with people, that usually means I'm not getting anything done. And as far as work goes, as far as, writing and stuff like that goes. Um, so sometimes it's not until I meet people, or uh, it has been surprising how many people have emailed me or responded to a Facebook posting or LinkedIn posting saying that, oh, I've been watching you for years. I've been reading your books for years. And I'm going, I didn't even know that, or how many people know me, uh, but I don't know them except they know me through my books. And so when that happens, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, it gives you kind of like a confirmation from the universe or from God that, you're doing the right thing, you're doing what you were supposed to have done, because this has been my inspiration. It's, kind of like, when you find something that you really like, you want to share it with others. Okay, but how do I do that? Well, I've spent a lot of time reading the Vedic literature, and it's volumes and volumes and volumes of books. Most people don't have time to do that. So what I try to do is, take all of what I've read about maybe one topic, reincarnation, or another thing about karma, and put all the things I've read into like one chapter. And that's kind of what my book, The Secret Teachings of the Vedas, was all about, combining all the different things I've read about it to explain what the Vedic literature says about this particular topic, and then go on from there so that other people can take advantage of it in what I would say like a systematic way and an easy to understand way where you can, say read one book and, you know, acquire the knowledge from maybe 30 volumes or 40 volumes of books. So this is kind of what I've tried to do, and it seems to have worked pretty well. Um, I mean, the other thing is that I've always written according to this one mantra that I've developed, and that is You have to explain things in a way that people can understand it. If they cannot understand it, they will never remember it. If they cannot remember it, they'll never apply it to their lives. If they cannot apply it to their lives, then basically you have missed your mark in being able to convey the ideas and the philosophy in a way that's practical, in a way that they can understand. And so that's what I've always tried to do. Because sometimes the Vedic philosophy is very deep. And so you have to explain it in a way that's simple to understand so that they can see it, so they can understand it, remember it, and apply it to their lives so that it becomes something practical. It becomes part of a path that allows that person to reach their, what I call the highest potential, materially and spiritually, you know, so that we can work on our health, we can work on our emotions, we can work on our intellect. Ultimately, we work on our spirituality. So, and this is the whole purpose of the Vedic culture itself, is to develop ourselves to reach our highest potential in every way. Ultimately, spiritually, because that's what we are. We're all spiritual beings. So, this is the ultimate goal of the Vedic tradition itself. And and that way also create harmony in society by trying to or arranging or giving the knowledge by which we can arrange society in a way that where we can all reach our highest potential and also be a contributing factor to society, where society appreciates what we do and we also enjoy what we do. So depending on our proclivities, our intelligence, our, interests, we can develop ourselves accordingly that way. So, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of misunderstanding that's been placed on the Vedic tradition and the culture of India that has no scriptural support. So once I realize that, or once I find what is the true doctrine of what the Vedic literature has to offer, I also try to emphasize on that too, so you get a proper understanding of what the Vedic culture supplies and what it advocates. So that's been a kind of like one of the goals of my writing as well. And anybody can find, I've got, geez, I've got over 200 articles on my website. And anybody can go on the website and find tons of information on various aspects of the Vedic tradition, the Vedic culture. And so anybody, if I can make a promotion now, you can just go on www.stephen hyphen or dash knapp.com. Stephen is Stephen hyphen KNAPP.com. And you can go on there and find descriptions of all my books, but also lots of articles that you can just download or read for free. And so, because I try to make this as easily accessible as possible so people can get the information. It doesn't cost them a lot. Because that's one thing that always bothers me is that, you go to these seminars by yoga instructors and it costs you like, a couple $100 or something like that. Well, actually, this knowledge, you can easily get it for free. And if I can give it for free, then, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, it may not help my income that much, but I always figure if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, somehow or another, the universe or God will see to it that I'm supported and I still getting by somehow or another. And while otherwise, I, try to give this information as freely as possible. So that's been part of the purpose of what I do.
Absolutely love the ethos behind the meaning behind everything that you shared, and absolutely your website is an incredible resource. So I obviously second that to everyone listening. Check it out, guys. It's absolutely incredible. So, okay, now the other thing I would like to touch on here, though, Stephen, which is sort of we're talking about the present day, and as I said to you, we'll move around in time a little bit. I'm curious to ask you though, because I feel this is relevant for other seekers out there, let's say the time in your life when you realized that you would dedicate your life to this, so obviously going back in time a little bit now, I'd like to touch on that briefly, only because it's one thing to sort of be curious about a different path and say, okay, I'm going to explore, these different things. But it's another thing to do what you have done to dedicate your life to this service, as we've already spoken about, but also on such a consistent basis. I mean, to consistently perform, if that's the right word to use, at such a high level in terms of sharing this knowledge for so long to so many people. But I'm curious just to touch on, even though I'm sure this might not be an interesting question because people probably ask me this all the time, but that moment, what was the moment for you when you looked ahead and you realize, okay, I'm going to be part of this for my lifetime, or at least for the foreseeable future, and when it went from curiosity to dedication, if that makes sense, where I'm going with this, please.
Well, it's kind of a longer story than most people might have because basically I started questioning my existence when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And
Okay.
I remember specifically one morning I was laying in bed. It was a Saturday morning. My parents hadn't gotten up yet. Everybody was sleeping in. And I was laying in bed wondering, like, you know, how did I get this body? How did I get into this family? How did I get into this situation? In other words, somehow or another, I was already aware that I was a spiritual being. I'm the spirit soul inside the body. I'm not the body, it's just a vehicle. But how did I get this body? How did I get here? And the other thing is, why is this body so vulnerable? Why is it that, you have to feed it, you have to let it sleep, you have to take it to the bathroom. If you don't breathe for 3 minutes, you die. Or why is it, is this natural? So I couldn't understand it. I don't know. Maybe this is a carryover from a previous existence. But I had these questions that I couldn't find the answer to. My pastor didn't have the answers. My parents didn't have the answers. Nobody I knew had the answers. So, at that age, you just kind of go on with your life and try to figure out what you're supposed to do and how you fit in. But then in my teenage years, I was a musician and I would hang out with other musicians. And, we might party like anything, playing our music, and then actually sit down later and wonder, well, okay, where do we really fit into this world? What's the point of it? And so I reached a point where, I had to put the guitar down and I had to find some serious answers. I had to, okay, what's the point of this life? Especially if I don't know what to do. And because it still goes back to how did I get here? Where am I going? Who and what am I? So then I thought, well, I'm born and raised a Christian. I'll look into that first. So then I read the Bible from cover to cover, which took me a year to do that. A lot of insight, a lot of moralistic principles, but it still didn't answer my key questions as to how did I get here? What am I doing? Where did I come from? And where am I going? And so then I had to look elsewhere, but I didn't know where to look. I was just some guy from a small town, just a simple seeker, wondering where do I look next. So then I looked into, Judaism, Egyptology, um, Eastern mysticism, the Quran, uh, witchcraft, I Ching, you name it. I looked at it and I could see where everything was connected. I could see where all these different things are connected. There's similarities that you can recognize. But I still couldn't find the answer to those specific questions that I had. And then a friend of mine went to Toronto for a visit and met, and that was probably a year or two after the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. So he met some devotees on the street and they give him a pamphlet and he comes back with it and we're looking at it and he's looking at some book. They only had about 6 books at the time. And but then he was saying, and this book here is like the Hindu Bible. I'm going like, what is that? The Bhagavad Gita. I'm going like, that's what I want to know. I want to know because I was looking at every culture around the world. What is their concept of God? What is their concept of the soul? What is the connection? And where, because I had this feeling that God can be perceived everywhere if you just have the right vision. And I was trying to get that vision, trying to find out how to get it. So I thought, that's what I want. I want this book, Bhagavad Gita. So anyway, we sent for our books, and he got his books. I got my book, the Bhagavad Gita. And when I read the Bhagavad Gita, that was the first time I found a book that actually answered my questions. What is the soul? Who or what is God? What is our relationship with Him? What is karma? What is reincarnation? What are all these different things that compose what we are, how we got here, where we're going, or where we should be going? So that was the other thing. So as we would compare notes, my friend and I, then I started sending for more books from the Hare Krishna movement. But there was also the Self-Realization Fellowship in California, and they had a nice catalog of books too. So I was ordering from books from them, the Upanishads and things like that I wanted. And once I got the Bhagavad Gita, I knew right then and there, I need more of this. This is the kind of information I want. I want to get more of it, and so I was grabbing up everything I could. And and then that was back in when 1971. And then I came across the Bhagavad Gita in 1972. And then finally, no, that was 1971 as well. Finally, in 1972, my friends convinced me that if we're going to find our careers in music or anything like that, somehow or another, we got to get out of this small town and go to a bigger place. So anyway, we moved from our small town of Buchanan, where I grew up, to Denver, Colorado. And Denver, Colorado just had a newly opened Krishna temple. And so once again, we met some devotees on the street. I found out where to go. So I started going to the temple on a regular basis and learning more and learning the philosophy. And I just become a vegetarian. So I love the Sunday vegetarian feasts and stuff. So everything worked out really well. And but I'm not a joiner. I don't join organizations. That was just the way I was. Even when I was a kid, my whole neighborhood became Cub Scouts, but not me. And even when I was confirmed in the Lutheran Church had a youth group, and they would call me, "Oh, why don't you come and be a part of it and participate?" Nope, not me. I'm not doing that. So I was a very individualistic kind of person. So it took me about 4 years from 1972 to 1975 before I finally decided to join the ashram. And and the reason why I finally decided to, join was because it's well understood that if you want to really understand the depths of the Vedic tradition, you have to go beyond mere academics and you have to put it into practice. Of course, I was already chanting on beads and everything way before that, but to actually join the ashram, take up a lifestyle where you're consistently engaged in the process of bhakti yoga, where you go through the morning program, where you have time to chant your japa, your Hare Krishna mantra on beads and stuff like that. Uh, that that's a whole nother platform altogether, basically. And so that's when I decided, yeah, this is what I really want to do. This is what I want to, dedicate myself to. I want to get deeper and deeper into the realization that is provided by this particular path. And of course, bhakti yoga is the means by which, instead of trying to void the mind, we actually fill the mind with transcendental sound vibration so that the consciousness becomes more and more uplifted to operate on a frequency which allows the spiritual dimension which exists all around us to open up, or we open up to it. And we can not only participate on that level, but we can actually observe it and operate on a level by which we interact with the spiritual dimension. And the more spiritual we become, then obviously the more we're in tune with the spiritual reality, the spiritual world that exists all around us. And that was my experience. That actually, it began to work that way. So as the more spiritual you become, the whole thing of it is like this. Any religion does this. Whatever path you are taking, it's basically based on this one principle, that the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. It's like a psychic who can see beyond birth and death. They can see the other dimension. They can see, talk to dead people, so to speak, things like that. So, in the same way, the more spiritual you become, the more you can perceive that which is spiritual. And you can see your own spiritual identity. You can begin to see the spiritual identity of other living beings, whether they're humans or other species. And what's most important is you become aware of the connection between you and the Supreme Spirit or God. And any religion should be able to do that for you, because the only differences in religion is really the time in history in which it appeared, the place in which it appeared, the potential of people to receive it, and that way, those are the three main differences between any authorized or genuine spiritual path. The time, place, and circumstance. So, in that regard, the Vedic literature was given to a society in India at the time that was very receptive to the spiritual instructions and achieving the spiritual goal um, of the path of yoga. And of course, there's different paths of yoga. There's jnana yoga, intellectual yoga. There's karma yoga, yoga of action. There's Raja Yoga or Astanga Yoga, which is the mystical form of yoga. And of course, Bhakti Yoga, which is yoga based on love and devotion. And so, Bhakti Yoga, especially, uh, tries to give you the means by which you put transcendental vibration into your consciousness. And by that association, it purifies or spiritualizes the consciousness so that you can begin to perceive that which is spiritual. It's kind of like an example I use is like radio waves. Well, okay, somebody may come along and say, I don't believe in anything I don't see, taste, touch, hear, or whatever. Whatever I cannot perceive, I don't believe in it. Therefore, I also don't believe in radio waves. Well, what are you going to think? You think this guy's either a lunatic or he's coming out of the Stone Age, because everybody knows the effects of radio waves. We use them all the time. Now we don't just have a receiver for radio waves, but we also have a broadcaster, which almost everybody has in the form of a cell phone. So anybody who says, I don't believe in radio waves, you naturally would think that this guy's off his rocker. He doesn't understand. The point of it is the spiritual waves, the spiritual frequencies are also all around us. But just as with radio waves, in order to use them, you have to have one thing, and that is a good receiver. So, in the same way with spiritual waves and frequencies, you have to become a good receiver by raising your consciousness up to the level in which you begin to function on the same frequency levels as the spiritual dimension around you. And this is the whole point. This is the whole point of any religion, but it's especially the point of bhakti yoga, by purifying their consciousness, by associating with that which is on the higher frequencies, like chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna mantra is basically the sound waves and frequency of the name of God. And by associating with the name of God, which is non-different from God himself in that sense, then you begin to uplift your consciousness so you become a good receiver for perceiving the spiritual dimension all around you. And the more you practice it, the more sincere you are, then obviously the faster the progress you make. So anyway, that is how I decided I wanted to devote my life to this. But it's also part of the process of why I decided I wanted to share this with other people and give them an easy process to understand what can also be a very deep philosophy in that sense. So that's what I've been working on ever since. Working on my own spiritual development, because you can't put that aside. You have to keep working on that, but also helping others in the same way so they can also develop their own spiritual reality. And it's like I say, sometimes I don't know the effect that I've had on other people, but it's with great humility, it's with great uh, pleasure, some great satisfaction when people do come up and say how much, you know, a certain book that I've written has affected them or how much they've gotten out of it. Like I used to write bigger books, 200, 300 pages. But sometimes I've realized that in this day and age, people like shorter books, books that aren't too long. So one book I came out with, which you also might be interested in, is a book called The Power of the Maha Mantra, which is the Hare Krishna mantra. Uh, Subtitled, What's So Special About Chanting Hare Krishna? And it's only about 120 pages, but I give Shastric evidence, verses from the Vedic literature that explains how special it is, how it works, how you can make your own beads if you don't have your own beads, and how you chant on the beads, how you make this a part of your daily practice, and like that. And quite honestly, I'm surprised at how many people have purchased that book or downloaded it because it's also on Kindle Unlimited. So people have downloaded it by the hundreds, actually, and it's that's another way. Sometimes I know that maybe something I've done has produced a good effect with people and has been receptive with people. Um, but it's been one of those things where even I'm surprised at how many people have taken an interest in that aspect of the Vedic culture and Bhakti yoga. So, so I hope that answers your question in that regard.
Very much so, Stephen. Well, it answers several questions actually, but both on a personal level and with everything we're talking about today. I definitely will check out that book that you mentioned, but more of your work in general. I have notes already prepared to order some of them because, to be honest with you, I've come across your work quite recently, and it's not because
Mm,
of the award. It's actually not. It's actually. Um, I came across you through, I can't remember specifically where originally, but I started reading
mm,
posts and articles and things like this. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head what the original catalyst for that was, but somewhere along the line I started reading articles, as you mentioned, seeing posts, and I thought, wow, this guy really knows about this stuff. There's some very wonderful insights here. And so now I will definitely be reading more of your work. But going back to what you said prior to that about the journey and the goal, if you like, of all different religions, it's a wonderful way to break this down. And I also think that there's an interesting part of your story as well, which is when you run the temple and when you're involved in work in Detroit in particular, or in these kinds of areas, and I know you speak all around, you mentioned earlier that you are lecturing and all of these things you were doing, but specifically I'm just going to put this in layman terms here. I read that and I thought, okay, teaching people spiritual lessons on the mean streets of Detroit, even if that's a complete stereotype, and maybe it is, but teaching these lessons where people are deeply immersed in the material world, if you like, where they haven't gone yet to that higher vibration that we're talking about here. And interestingly, I had a similar experience to yourself, by the way, in my sort of childhood or younger life, where I would have these feelings of sort of watching myself, but not in a disassociative way, in a sense of thinking, how did I get here? Like a blankness. I relate, by the way, to what you said there. But if people haven't had that, but they still know that there's something more, what I'm getting at is you teach in environments where it's all very well going into like an ashram or going into a place where people are already receptive, but taking this into places where they might not be totally receptive or they might not be totally aware, even if they have an instinctive feeling that, okay, I want to know about something spiritual, but I don't know what it is. That presents different challenges and that presents perhaps a different method of putting across some of these concepts. And I'm just curious, I know this is quite a broad question, but I'm just curious about some of the challenges you maybe had to overcome in those kinds of environments and how you overcame them in order to put this across, as you said earlier, in a way that people can understand and in a way that people can apply, which I hope we're doing today. So that is That's again the question in a nutshell, if that makes sense where I'm going with this. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always challenging, depending on where you are. And Detroit's not an easy place. It's a pretty tough town in many ways. But everybody's looking for peace. Everybody's looking for happiness. Everybody's looking for a means by which they feel, like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So it's kind of like that. You can just draw that interest into allowing someone to understand this particular way of looking into that means of, what should I say, completion, where you feel more complete. Of course, it's ongoing work in progress, you might say, for anybody. But so basically, of course, the Hare Krishna movement has a few things that most anybody likes, and that is music or the bhajans, chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, singing of the Hare Krishna mantra, singing, and anybody can move with that. Anybody can dance with that. So that's always an interesting thing. People participate. And we also have what's called prasadam, which is food, vegetarian food, which has been offered to Krishna, either offered to the deities in the temple or whatever. And even the Black community here, they may be ever so addicted to something like fried chicken. That's a common thing that people like. Well, sometimes we have what's called pakoras. Pakoras is cauliflower dipped and deep fried in a batter, and you mix that with tomato chutney. And sometimes, sometimes we've had guests that feel that they're eating chicken. So the whole point of it is you can begin to, which then also is a means by which you become purified because this food itself becomes spiritually surcharged. And by eating food that is spiritually surcharged, it also begins to spiritually surcharge or purify or spiritualize your consciousness in that way too. So there's different ways of working on it. But yeah, sometimes people think because in Vedic cooking, basically there's the art of spicing. And with the art of spicing, you can make practically different foods taste like anything else that you want. And so as you become used to that, then it's like you're not missing out on anything. So when people come to the temple, sometimes they have that and they keep coming back because they're attracted to that. Maybe they're attracted to the music, the kirtans, as we call it, the chanting and dancing, or maybe they're attracted to the food. They have different aspects that they can be attracted to. So that works out well. It's not like some organizations that require you to go to the cemetery and meditate at midnight or something like that. It's very open and there's a lot of different aspects that you can use to highlight your spiritual interest, your spiritual progress. And it's not like what should I say, narrow path. It's not so narrow, it's not so narrow-minded. But anybody can participate in it. Of course, we do have those people that are so indoctrinated, if I can use that word, into their own spiritual path that they're even afraid to look at another spiritual path, or they think it's of the devil or of Satan or whatever, that they won't even look at it. In fact, one of the first times I went to a temple in Denver, they were renovating the temple. They had just acquired it. They were renovating. It was an old church, actually. They took out all the pews. This was going to be the temple room, and they were going to have deities, the deities of Krishna. But they had them in a back room until they were ready to bring them out into the main room when it was ready. So they could see that I was interested, and so they asked me, "Well, you want to go to an arti ceremony?" Arti ceremony, what the heck is that? He said, but I said, sure, I'm open to it. And so an arti ceremony is when they offer the incense, the ghee lamp, the chamara whisk fan, the peacock fan, all these things to the deities that are on the altar. And so when I went back to this back room, I was looking at, they had opened the curtains, and then there was the deities of Krishna and his brother Balaram, and like that. And I was watching the arti ceremony going on when they were offering the incense, the ghee lamp, and everything. And I was thinking to myself, oh, wait a minute. Now, coming from a Christian background, even though I've read so many other philosophies and researched other cultures in the world, I was thinking, like, isn't this like idol worship? Maybe I should be a little concerned about this. But then I was watching this and I had this feeling inside of me that was so positive that I thought, I don't care. I like us. This is nice. I just had to learn more about it and what it represented. And so I didn't care. I didn't care whether someone may think it's idol worship or not. You have to get used to it. You have to get open to it. You have to understand what it is, what the process entails. And and all I know is that once I left the temple that night, it was a winter evening in Denver, Colorado. It was completely dark after that, but the whole world looked completely different to me after that. It was like a whole nother experience that I had not had before. And and the thing of it was is that when I was driving back to my apartment, I had the radio on, and George Harrison's song "My Sweet Lord" comes on the radio. I thought, if this is not synchronicity, I don't know what is. And of course, there's the Hare Krishna mantra in that song, "My Sweet Lord," and everything. And it was like it was such a joyful experience after that. That yeah, after that, I was going to the temple every week, every Sunday. I was there. And that's how I got started in it. But that's the point. You have to be sometimes a little open-minded to other cultures and other processes so you can take advantage of them. If you're too closed, if you're too rigid, if you're too indoctrinated, if I can say that, then you might lose out on a special experience due to your own restrictions. So that's one thing I've learned. And I don't press it. If people are so convinced of their own path, they're scared to look at anything else, then okay, so be it. You know, I'm not going to try to twist your arm or anything. So it's up to you. Sometimes I've had people come around, like maybe some kids will come around to the temple and their parents, no, I'm not going in there. No way. That's of the devil or something like that. But gradually they start getting worn down and they like something. Oh, they like the food. Okay. Oh, they like the personality of the people who participate. Oh, okay. Or they like some of the paintings. They like the artwork. And so gradually they find different things they do appreciate. And then I've had that experience where I've seen people gradually open up, and actually participate in the culture of the Hare Krishna movement or the process of Bhakti Yoga. So it goes so sometimes it can take some time.
That is a fascinating insight into just dealing with people, into just dealing with the human condition, because we can't assume that it's all sort of sunshine and rainbows on the spiritual path. I mean, in actual fact, I'm reading a book at the moment about your teacher, Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, called Messenger of the Supreme Lord, and it's like a biography of his. You probably know that one. And to be honest with you, regardless of anything else spiritual, just the sheer courage, the sheer bravery. I mean, this isn't even a question necessarily for you. I just want to say this is absolutely awe-inspiring. And when I was reading about it coming over on a cargo ship, the age that he was then, the heart attacks, started when he started chanting and preaching, and just, and obviously some of the opposition as well as the acceptance to take this movement in the Western world to where it is now is just absolutely awe-inspiring courage. And I just, and in many ways, then your work obviously continues that legacy in a similarly courageous manner, because that is something that really stands out. I mean, to dedicate your life to this, even what you said earlier, that words to the effect, God will always work things out for you, even though you can't always see exactly how it's going to happen. Even something like that takes a lot of courage. So there's a lot of lessons there. The last couple of things, Stephen, we will
Yeah,
because
I'll just say I'm also awe-inspired by the endeavor that Srila Prabhupada took at his age because I'm 75 now, and I can tell you there's things that I cannot do, nor would I even want to try to do that he did at his age. So I'm definitely awe-inspired in the same way you are when I read about, and the thing of it is, if he hadn't have done that, where would I be now? Maybe some decadent musician somewhere. I'd probably be dead by now if that was the case. So, you know, things have changed drastically because of his simple endeavor. And he had two heart attacks on the boat when he came over. So it's definitely awe-inspiring for me too when I read about how much trouble, how much difficulty, how much sacrifice he made to come to America and live on the Bowery in New York, until he was able to get established and all the sacrifices he made to be able to give this to other people. So it means that I have no excuse. If he can do it at his age, then I have no excuse. So.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it is just such an inspiring story, such an inspiring legacy in that sense. And I just well, and it's a chain. It's sort of like dominoes, isn't it? Really. I mean, if, as you
Mhm.
say, where would any of us be now if he hadn't have come to America? Somebody like your friend Radhana Swami wouldn't have become involved either, and I wouldn't have read his book. And so, it's a chain reaction all the way around the world that was just incredible, absolutely incredible. With that being said, though, Stephen, obviously when you were there around the era that he was still with us on our physical plane, teaching and all of this sort of stuff. What were the interactions, or to what degree, because were your interactions with him? In other words, when you were in the ashram and everything, how did it work at that time? Because when I've been reading about this, he was traveling a lot. I mean, I've seen the amount of countries, by the way, when we're talking about age, I mean, the amount of countries he was visiting in his 70s. I've seen pictures of it, all around Moscow and Africa and I mean, crazy places. But to what degree at that time was he in the States sort of with you guys, and to what degree was his presence felt with you all? Because when I'm reading the book, I've read that there were these different centers in different parts of the States, and he would go from being one teaching for so long, then he would get requests to go across to another one and all of this type of thing. But of course, I'm reading this many years later, so I'm just curious, very briefly, of your memories of him personally at that time, if that's something which I don't want to go off track because I need to wrap up with a couple of questions. But as soon as we're on the subject, it's very, very relevant because without his legacy, none of us would be here. Oh, there's a car alarm. Hopefully that won't pick up too much. You're in Detroit, and I'm the one who has a car alarm going
Oh
off
yeah, we
in
we
the
know car alarms very well.
Oh dear, there we are. Stop now.
That's
Anyway,
all right.
sorry about that.
Well, it was interesting because you know, Prabhupada extended his association to the devotees through his visits to the temples.
Mm,
It was by that means by which he instructed us. He gave classes every day. Of course, he worked on his translation work, translating books like Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, or other books like that. So he was constantly engaged in this kind of work, but it would also help enthuse the devotees, of course, to have his personal association. And so it helped guide us in the right direction, make sure we were on the right track and everything. And personally, I was not, I saw him give many classes. I never spoke with him personally. I, by that time, quite honestly, I'd already been reading the books, and he was automatically answering so many of my questions just by having gotten his association through his books. But I saw him in San Diego, I saw him in Los Angeles, saw him in San Francisco a couple times at the Rath Yatra festivals that they had there. I saw him again in Chicago. I saw him again in New Vrindavan, West Virginia. I saw him again in Denver, Colorado, when he visited there. Then I saw him again at Rath Theatre in 1975 in San Francisco, and then again in Los Angeles again in 1975. Having seen him first in San Diego and Los Angeles in 1972. So I had seen him over the course of a number of different years, and that was, for some of us, that was enough. It was enough to get that kind of association to enthuse us to continue going on with our work, with our devotional service, with our bhakti yoga, and making sure we were following in the right way. And other people needed more of that. Different people needed different types of association. And so that was basically how it worked. He would go from, maybe some disciples would set up a temple. They would get like a following. Some devotees would join. And then Prabhupada would come and check it out. He would check out the temple, enthuse the devotees, give classes, sometimes initiate devotees, giving them their spiritual name, things like that. And then sometimes temples would continue to progress where they would install deities of Radha and Krishna and others like that. So the temples would continue to expand and grow in various ways. So, and he would oversee the whole institution from wherever he was traveling. He would oversee the whole institution from a global basis, basically, which is not easy to do. So he was also busy not just in translating, but in management. And he would also ask sometimes, when can I be free of the management so I can focus more on my translation work? Because at the time, he was really trying to finish translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is about 18,000 verses. Traditionally, it's 18,000 verses. And so it takes time because not only did he translate the verse, but then he also gave a purport, an explanation of the verse. So this all took a lot of time, and he was hoping to get more time to do that and be relieved from his managerial work, which was not always possible. So it was interesting to watch this and see how it was happening.
Absolutely. It's just something I was curious just because you know what you said there, not only with his legacy, but also, you were saying earlier about the radio waves and the spiritual vibrations and so forth. I've also found that when you spend time with these advanced spiritual practitioners, you can learn something just by being in their presence as well, whether you speak to them or not. And of course, you learn intellectually by listening and learning that way. But I've also found there's a very intangible feeling, which actually you mentioned about coming out of that temple and everything seemed brighter, and My Sweet Lord came on the radio, everything. And I've also had that experience from spending time with particular practitioners as well, and you come away and sort of carry it with you in some way. So that was actually my reason for asking that. Okay, the last question, because I have to go at about half past the hour your time. So to wrap this up and so that people can take this in and practically apply what they've understood, as you said earlier, with your mantra for writing, I would like to ask Stephen about your future plans really, because you've dedicated a lifetime to this and you've been awarded and recognized very recently, and you've impacted countless lives, all of the things that we've said. And we have spent a bit of time retrospectively, and none of us know how long we have, and I'm sure that is also naturally a consideration, especially with the spiritual path. We all have to make peace with that. So, respectfully, I also say this, that we can talk about the future in the sense of the remainder of your earthly lifetime, but if you're comfortable with it, even beyond that, and your legacy, even beyond that time, if that comes into it. But in short, the future, however far ahead you would like to discuss, however far ahead you would like to look, I'm curious when in many ways, you've reached sort of the top of the mountain with having achieved so much and having helped so many people. But the journey's never over until it's over. There's always more practice to do. There's always more things to learn. There's always something else that will present itself. And I'm personally also very inspired by, um, you see people in the public eye. Somebody like, I don't know, like Clint Eastwood, for example. He's made another movie and he's like 95 years old, or David Attenborough, for example, is somebody I admire because of I also have environmental interests, and he's 99 years old and he's still doing stuff. And I'm thinking, well, that could easily be you, couldn't it? I mean, even 10, 15 years from now, maybe you'll still be doing some of these things. Who knows? But it's just to talk about the future. I don't have a really narrow question. It's just very broadly just to talk about what's inspiring you from this point forward, please, Stephen. That would be lovely.
Well, that was one reason why I came out with my autobiography. I just came out with it a few weeks ago, actually, called Why I Became a Hindu, a Krishna Devotee, subtitled From a Simple Seeker to a 2025 Padma Shri Award from the President of India. And so, because the one thing that always happens, especially when I'm in India, even here, when I'm giving a talk or a lecture, people ask me, especially Indians, come up and ask me, "How did I ever get started in taking an interest in Vedic culture? How did I get, continued with it? How did I start writing books? All these different things." So this autobiography just explains everything in detail, because oftentimes I don't have a lot of time to explain how did I get started. Um, so that's one thing. It kind of, in some ways, it kind of wraps things up and you reach a stage where you kind of feel like, well, I think I've said everything I have to say, which is a good feeling. You've to reach this point where I'm pretty happy with what I've done. I'm pretty happy with the management I've done with for temples. I'm pretty happy with expanding other into new temples in the area. I'm pretty happy with all the work that I've done with writing and publishing and all the people I've come in contact with. So I don't feel I have a whole lot more to do in reaching out or publishing. Of course, you never know. I might come across a topic where I feel like this is inspiring me to write a book about it. I'll definitely write more articles, because sometimes in a simple article, you can explain the essence of something very briefly, and a person can get more out of that than going through a whole book sometimes. Um, I might do more videos, something like that. But basically, at this point in my life, what I really want to do is go deeper and deeper into my chanting, deeper and deeper into the chanting of Hare Krishna, because sometimes I feel like when I'm simply in my own personal temple room, it's like I'm having a conversation between me and God, me and Krishna, just by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. And so I want to get deeper into that. And I also want to get deeper into my own personal Raganuga Bhakti and become more, um, what should I say, solidified or more realized in my own personal connection and relationship with Krishna in that regard. And basically prepare for entering the spiritual world. I mean, the whole goal of life is to not only understand who and what you are, but to relieve yourself of any future rounds of birth and death, any future reincarnations or samsara, as it's said in the Vedic literature. So if I'm in this point right now, in this lifetime, I don't want to miss the goal by being preoccupied with other things. I definitely want to make sure I reach the goal by relieving myself of any future rounds of birth and death in this material world. I mean, quite honestly, I've never been really comfortable in a material body. There's always been odd things about it that I've kind of questioned. And just being in the material world itself is a challenge. Life itself is full of challenges. Of course, you develop yourself more completely by meeting those challenges, But at the same time, it's like, okay, you reach a point where if you've developed yourself spiritually, where you can easily rise above all that, get ready to enter into the spiritual dimension on a permanent basis. And that's basically where I'm at now. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to accomplish. And if I've got the opportunity now, I don't want to miss that opportunity. I want to make sure I achieve the real goal of human existence, the human, uh, the purpose of human life. So that's my real goal at this point in time.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful. I mean, as you mentioned, we all have to prepare in that sense, but that's a beautiful description of what that really means. And I'm very glad that you shared that candidly. In fact, I'm very, very glad that you shared everything today. There's been so many fun stories, of course, but there's been so many lessons as well. And I'm honestly, truly humbled. I really mean that. Not just saying that at the beginning. It really is a pleasure because, as well as using this as a method of enlightening other people, or in other words, what you said about the radio waves, helping people to move up a level in the spiritual awareness. On a personal level, there's been so many things in here that have clarified my own path, and I'm also very, very grateful for that, Stephen. So it's been honestly an absolute pleasure, and just thank you so much for speaking from your heart, and Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. I had a good time, and thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.